Hey everyone, how's it going? Today I want to show you how to grade your DJI Air 3 log footage to get it from looking like this to this in some really super easy steps. So let's get into it. First off, I hear a lot of people saying that shooting in log is really daunting. They don't know how to expose it properly. They don't know how to color grade it. And I really understand that. You know, I've spoken about my first kind of beginning of journey of doing this stuff. And my first camera was a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, and that only shooted in log. I didn't have any other picture profile. So I had to learn to color grade. And I was like, you know, searching a lot on the internet and seeing all these videos that were quite honestly talking complete crap. A lot of people were saying things like just boost the saturation and a bit of contrast. And like, I'm going to show you why that just does not work, right? That's just complete rubbish. You do not want to color grade like that if you want to actually get your footage looking half decent. So I'm going to show you some really simple steps that actually work. One thing I will say though is that this is a skill and an art form in itself. And it can take, you know, quite a while sometimes to get it looking how you want to. And then sometimes some things will look great, and then another time things won't, and you don't quite know how to fix them. Maybe your exposure wasn't right or your white balance. You can't quite get things looking how you want them to. Sometimes this still kind of happens to me, but due to experience, I kind of know how to just fix things sometimes in post, and that is the worst thing to do, right? You don't want to just fix things in post, right? Make sure your white balance is right and your exposure is right when you're first shooting, to make sure you don't have to fix things in post, because otherwise sometimes you can't really fix them that well. You can kind of make it look good and get by, but it's not going to look as good as if you just kind of made it look good in the first place. So try to really understand things like white balance and exposure. I'm not going to go massively into this right now. There's actually another video I have that I'll link somewhere, and I'll link it in the description, about how to set your white balance and your exposure and all this for the DJI Air 3, and how to kind of give it that cinematic feel. So click on the link below and go and watch that first, and maybe this will kind of make more sense. But going back to what I said earlier, this is a skill and an art form. So sometimes, you know, when things don't look right, don't get frustrated with yourself. Just keep trying, and over time you will just get better. And also the really interesting thing about this is, because it is a skill and an art form, you're gonna like progress and develop. I look at the way I was color grading now compared to how I was color grading last year, and it's actually quite different. You know, I was just used a very bit of a different technique, different tactic, but then I just kind of progressed into finding this way. So you're going to be constantly evolving and changing as well, and that's kind of part of the process as well. So so keep looking for new ways to do things as well. Like, this is the way I'm color grading now, but next year I might be color grading different, right? And it's the same way for you. You might look at this technique now and just be like, yeah, this is great. But then actually, like in a few months, you might find someone else and you might actually prefer that. So that's just the kind of way art goes and the way these things kind of move, right? You can't stay in the same place doing the same thing over and over again. But let's get into it anyway. So the first step I actually want to take is to actually show you how to set D-Log inside your drone. Some of you might not know that. If you do know that, then you can skip this part. But I'm going to turn the drone on. If you don't know how to turn the drone on, you definitely need to go back and watch my other video, the cinematic setup one, because I'll show you all of that and the basic setups in that. So there's two things I actually want to show you inside the drone real quick. If you click on this section here, this comes up. Make sure that D-Log M is selected. In the DJI Air 3, you can only shoot in D-Log M, so you can't shoot in standard D-Log, but that's fine. And also your white balance, just make sure that's set to 5,600 or at least 5,000 when you go out filming in the sunlight. Make sure your white balance is right, because color grading is going to just be really difficult if your white balance is off. You know, it's just, and your majority of the time you're going to be shooting in daylight, right? So just leave it on 5,600 or just 5,000. That's just the best way to go about that. All right, so you've gone out, you've got those real amazing bucket shots, you come back home, let's get into the grading. So the first thing you want to do is actually download the DJI D-Log to Rec 709 converter. To do that, you can just type it into Google, literally like DJI Air 3 D-Log M to Rec 709 LUT, and then you go into the DJI Download Center. So you want to get this DJI Air 3 DJI D-Log M to Rec 709, and you can download it for Windows or Mac. Like I said, I'm going to link this in the description below. I'm going to download it for Mac, and I'm going to be editing on Premiere Pro today. I've always edited in Premiere Pro. I know people always say that DaVinci is better for color grading, but I'm a Premiere guy, so maybe in the future I'll switch over. But anyway, all these principles can be used the same whether you're using Premiere or DaVinci. The basic what I'm going to do is go into Finder, go into Applications, Premiere Pro, Adobe Premiere Pro, Show Package Content, contents, Lumetri, LUTs, technical. You basically want to drag your log to Rec 709 converter into this folder. I've already got mine in there, as you can see. This way you'll find it in Premiere Pro, and it's one of the first steps we're going to take. So let's jump into Premiere Pro. So I've got my footage here now in Premiere Pro. This little clip of me just looking epic. Beautiful. The great thing about the Air 3 is the camera is actually amazing. Like the detail it captures and the color is just absolutely amazing, you know. For such a small little sensor, it really captures a lot. So color grading it is really fun, and you're able to really pull and push the images quite a lot to really get it how you want to. I don't want to go into too much of the details here in Premiere Pro and how to use Premiere Pro. I think you should have a kind of grasp on the beginning parts of opening it up, being able to create a sequence. If you don't know that, you probably want to go and, you know, go some few steps back and find out how to do that. But this is just literally one of the basic things you can do. Just open up the software, start a new sequence, and then just drag your clip into the sequence. And then how I always color grade is I always like to use adjustment layers. Adjustment layers are amazing. I'm not gonna go into too much detail about what they are and what you can do with them, but let's just say you can use them to adjust multiple clips at once. They're like a blanket layer that you can just, you know, use to adjust a bunch of things. So I'm just gonna select adjustment layer, 24 frames per second, and then I'm gonna get adjustment layer and drag it over my clip. So the adjustment layer is just hovering above it, and I'm just basically gonna add my effects to my adjustment layer. So let's go into effects and Lumetri. And we're gonna select Lumetri, and then I'm gonna drag Lumetri onto my adjustment layer. And now in my effects controls, I have Lumetri color on the adjustment layer. If you can't find any of these tabs like effects controls, or, you know, things are missing, basically all you do is go into the window up the top, and then you should be able to see what's open there. If you can't find what I'm looking at, then basically you might be able to find it in that window section up the top. Now the first thing we'll do is open up basic correction, and this is literally the most simplest step you can take. Like, this is why I do not believe in shooting in any other footage apart from log, okay, because it's so easy to make your footage look like your standard picture profile, but retaining so much more information that there's just no point in not shooting in log footage. Like, honestly, unless you're shooting like, you know, some sort of like, someone's hired you just to take a photograph of their piece of land or something, and they just don't care about it looking cinematic or anything, just always shoot in log. You always want there to be as much information inside your footage as possible, and you always want to, you know, be able to color grade it afterwards to look the best and all this. So just, there's no reason not to shoot in log, honestly, because look, all I'm going to do is here where it says import LUT, this is the LUT that we dragged in earlier. You literally go to this, so you should find the DJI Air 3 D-Log M to Rec 709 converter in there. Click on this, and already now basically what's happened is it's brought all the colors up. I've seen so many people say like, just boost the saturation. And I actually, when I'm color grading, I very rarely touch the saturation. But watch what happens. I'm gonna boost the saturation to add color in, okay? Right now that doesn't look too bad actually, and there's a few reasons for that. First of all, there's no skin tones. Skin tones, you always wanna like grade to your skin tones a lot of the time. But on a drone, there's not gonna be really many skin, I mean, there might be skin tones in there, but they're gonna be further away and stuff like that. But that doesn't look too bad, but as I start moving around the image, there is a lot of yellow there in this section here, right? And the saturation does boost, it kind of just puts a blanket and boosts all the colors. The thing with log though is log footage in different cameras kind of works differently, and LUT stands for like a lookup table. So it's almost like a calculation, and it's moving up just the colors it needs to. So say like a log footage from a Sony a7S III to the DJI log, it's just going to look really different. And if all you're doing is just boosting up the saturation, you're pulling up, all right, you're pulling up a lot of colors that you'd want to be in the image, but you're also pulling up a lot of colors that you don't want to be in the image. And then what are you going to do? Like remove them afterwards? It just makes things way too complicated, way too unbalanced. Your image is going to just end up unbalanced. So let's take this back down. I'm going to do what I said and use the official converter. And as you can see, it looks a little bit less saturated, but that's fine. That's fine, okay, because we can put the colors a bit more in afterwards, but at least now we know they're balanced. So you can see here this yellow section that I was looking at before, it's not oversaturated, the colors are preserved, yeah? And what you can do, you can mess around in this section, right? Like you can add some contrast in here if you really wanted to. And then you can add a bit of saturation, like very, very slightly. But honestly, I really don't touch the saturation much in in my color grade. Really the only thing I'd use in this section though is just to really correct stuff. So say like my highlights are a tiny bit blown out, I haven't exposed it, you know, too correctly in the actual filming, I can like drag that a little bit down. You know, look, you can see up the top there, it's like saving some of the clouds. So maybe I might want to go for a bit of a moodier look like this, and that looks, you know, can look quite nice. Or that's quite strong though, I've taken that down quite strong, but I was just making an example. You can use this to just correct things that you've done wrong. That's why it's in the basic correction kind of tab, right? So just use that to save some of the information that you might have just blown out while you were filming. If I'm gonna have a choice between overexposing it or underexposing it, always kind of overexpose it, but just by a bit, right? Don't go crazy on this. Just because though it's more easier to kind of bring it down a little bit than it is to kind of take it up. So let's go into the creative tab. Now after this section, there's two ways you can go. You can either use a creative LUT, which, you know, there's some really great ones out there. There's really great paid ones or really great even free ones. And they can really pull out some great colors in your image, give it that real cinematic feel without you really having to do too much afterwards. And that's what I would do. But if you didn't want to do that and you didn't want to use LUTs, what you'd really do is just kind of mess around with the vibrance and saturation. Vibrance boosts the same as saturation, but it saves the skin tones. If you open up Lumetri scope, which you will need open actually, and two things I'm going to show you is make sure you have vector scope YUV selected and waveform Luma selected. If waveform is not on Luma, go down to here to waveform and select Luma. So this little line here is your skin tone line. I know it's not exposing skin tones here, we're exposing, you know, the sunset and that. But it's always a good idea when you are exposing skin tones to just keep an eye on this and make sure, you know, things are not too blown out or going too orange. Now what I'm gonna do here is basically boost the vibrance, and I don't really like touching the saturation too much. The most I've got up to the saturation is maybe like 105. You know, I really try not to touch this, especially if there's skin tones involved and stuff, because it just drags up the things I don't want. So what I would do here is basically just kind of bring up the vibrance and kind of like add a tiny bit of saturation. But really with the saturation, I don't go over like, I would never really go over like 110 maybe. And even then it can be pushing it, especially if skin tones are involved. So look, if I add the vibrance, you can see it's bringing up the sea and a lot of other things. Obviously you don't want to overdo this too much either. You don't want to overdo anything too much. Like just take everything a bit carefully. Bring up the saturation a tiny bit as well. So now I'm going to go down into my curves, and this is where we're going to add a tiny bit of contrast in. So what we're going to do is add something called an S curve. So you basically want to drag the lows down, drag the highs up a little bit, and it's up to you how much you want to do this, right? All of this is to taste. All of this is to taste. So you've got to kind of choose how you want to do this. Don't blow things out too much. Sometimes like less is more. So just little touches here and there can add a massive amount of difference, you know? And then I'll drag the black up a little bit. I really like to drag the blacks up and then take the highs a little bit down. So this is without it and this is with it. So it's kind of subtle, but it adds just enough. And how to tell really what you're doing here is looking down at the waveform. So this is a representation of the lightest part of the image compared to the darkest. If you're kind of stretching this out, as you can see now, look at the wave curve, if I'm pulling this down, is adding that contrast in, right? And you can see it's stretching that waveform out. So, but once again, I like to kind of be just really delicate with this. I'm gonna undo all of that. I like to just be really delicate with this. I just feel like you don't need to do too much sometimes. I quite like that kind of soft look. And then here with the color wheels, what I'd recommend is dragging the shadows down to a bluey, greeny kind of tint. Once again, this is kind of the taste. I'm not really doing this. I'd spend a lot longer on this stuff if I was really doing it properly. I'm kind of showing you what I would really do, and then add more of an orangey red to the midtones. As I said, I'd really kind of just look at what colors I'm pulling out here and what's like working with the picture and the overall image. I wouldn't just kind of like be pulling these up like crazy. Really just see what's kind of working. And then maybe you can either put like in the highlights, you could put more of a like bluey pink, or you can kind of move it up to an orange as well if you want it to look more like that kind of summer feel. But if you wanted to go down the creative LUT look, then that's quite interesting. You can literally like scour the internet for some amazing LUTs that you're into. One LUT pack color that I always love is the Vision Color OSIRIS pack. I have bought these as different packages you can get within them. So you can get the M31 LUT, or yeah, there's just quite a few. The M31 LUT is great. I use that all the time. So I'm just going to show you how to color grade this if you do decide to use a LUT pack. So basically you would go to the creative section and find your LUT in here. As you can see, over the years, I've kind of just collected a bunch. Some don't really work too well, I'm going to admit. Like, you know, they just really shift your colors way too much into too many random places. But I'm going to use the OSIRIS pack, the M31, and what you want to look for is the Rec 709 version, because we've already converted the footage from logs to Rec 709. So I'm going to put that on, and as you can see, like what it's done here to the colors, it's just pulled out some of those blues. So that's a good start, right? And all these things are just a start. You don't want to just rely on that and say, okay, that's done now. I mean, we haven't even added contrast into this image yet or anything else. So from there, I'm just going to add in a bit of vibrance, but obviously from the Creative LUT pack, it's already put a bit of color in. So I'm going to be quite careful with this. I don't feel like I need to add much saturation in. Maybe like 102, you know, just really slightly. And then on my curves, I'm just going to add an S curve again. So just going to drag this down a little bit here, drag this up, and then that is so subtle, honestly. I can probably give that a bit more. There you go. And then I'm going to take up the blacks again, just to ever so slightly, just to give it that more of a faded kind of look. I really like that look. Ever so slightly, just to give it a bit more of a faded look. So this is without and this is with. So if we play that from now, as you can see, that LUT pack's just pulled out all the right colors. For me anyway, I think so. Here with the color wheels, I'm just gonna add a bit of blues into my shadows and then a bit of oranges into my highlights, or reds. Actually, I quite like the red kind of looks, bringing out a bit of the rock and the sky. It's a bit too much there. And then in the highs, I'm just going to add some bluey pink. You can add the bluey pink in the highs, or you can add more of an orange to give it more of a kind of like Hollywood look as well. Like they love that, just like oranges in the highs. So if you click that or not, I actually kind of like a blue pink though. Just gives it a bit more of a cooler look. Those highs there in that sky is a tiny bit blown out. If I wanted to fix that, I could probably just go into highlights, take that down a little bit. As I mentioned before, I'd probably spend a bit longer on this, trying to really pull out the colors I like, try and make it, you know, to try and get it how I want to. But that's fine. But I'm kind of happy with that. And really, you know, so without, it looks like that, and with, it looks like that, right? Super, super simple. One thing I'll show you though is that if your white balance was off, you can fix it here using temperature. So, you know, if you pull that up, it just gets a bit more warmer, the image. And if you pull it down, it just gets a lot more cooler. So yeah, you know, you can warm it up a little bit. Maybe I add like 10, but my white balance is pretty good on that day, so it doesn't really matter. But actually, that looks pretty good actually. And just keep messing around with things. Once you've done one section, doesn't mean you can't go back to it, right? So like just now I went back, added a tiny bit more vibrance in, just to give those colors a bit more pop. One last little thing you could do if you wanted to is add some vignette in, a really, really small amount. It basically just makes the side of the pictures a bit darker, ever so slightly. So that's really it. You can either use Creative LUT or you cannot. It's totally up to you. But the first step is really just getting that log to Rec 709. After you've done that, really just kind of mess around with the colors, get them looking how you want to. But I really hope this helps. Honestly, this was such a journey for me in the beginning, finding out this kind of information, finding someone who just made it simpler. And it still is an ongoing journey. I'm always changing the way I do things. Maybe in a year's time, I'll have my own LUT packs that I'll be using and offering to you guys. But for right now, please like, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.